you see a much different story. In fact, a great friend of the show, Daniel Turner, 7 years ago, shot a video, and those of you who are watching on the Salem News Channel, you can see it. For those of you that are listening, I'll let Daniel Turner himself describe it. Daniel Turner is, of course, founder and executive director of Power the Future, powerthefuture.com. Daniel Turner, PTF on X. Daniel, welcome back. For people listening that actually can't see the video you shot 7 years ago today, this is exactly what I'm talking about when you leave the big cities. You see scenes like this all over the country. Good morning, sir.
Oh, Chris, always great to be on your program, and thanks for having me. And yeah, it's a lot going through my mind this morning, not just because I've been up all night birthing sheep. It's lambing season here on the sheep farm.
Oh, my gosh.
So,
really?
I'm a little tired, and if you think I look banged up, you should smell me.
So some people count sheep, you birth sheep. All right,
yes,
I like it.
Okay. We have a commercial sheep farm in addition to running Power of the Future, and it's the lambing season. So every night, several sheep are giving birth. But there's a lot going through my mind right now. In this video 7 years ago, this is when I was launching the organization, and I was launching it because the war on coal was well underway after 8 years of Obama. And I had visited enough small towns like the one in that video to see the devastation that the global agenda has done. We've plunged so many people into dire poverty for the climate agenda, for the free trade agenda, whatever you want it to be called. And you know, all day yesterday, I saw so many people online saying, Trump hasn't read von Hayek, Trump hasn't read Mises. And I understand the intellectual argument towards free trade, but I asked the people who put those tweets out, have you ever been to little towns like this one in West Virginia where everything is destroyed and people are in total poverty? Because when the only employer in town is gone, then everyone is unemployed and everyone's house is useless and valueless because no one's moving into that town. And every school is closed because there's no more funding for the school, and every little shop. And that's how you get systemic poverty. That's how you get, for those who read the vice president's book or saw his movie, that's how you get towns in hillbilly elegy.
Yes.
They are allowed to happen because
yes.
people have convinced us, hey, you know what? It would be better if we moved this plant because it will be cheaper in the long run. And the American people haven't felt that cheaper effect. Maybe we can buy cheap crap from China, okay. But the American people don't look at the economy and say, wow, life is really good because things are expensive. Rural America sees the economy for 30 years and says, we've gotten shafted. And now we have opioid epidemics, and we have suicide problems, and just miserable poverty because you think it's better to make your product in Mexico or in China or somewhere else. So it's the birth of Power of the Future because of those coal miners.
Yes.
It's reversible, but thank you for pointing it out, especially across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, because I've seen it all across Pennsylvania.
Oh, this video of yours is Whitsville, West Virginia, a hollowed-out former coal town. Not far from stately Stigall Manor for years is a town called Coatesville. And Coatesville was home to a huge steel plant. And it was a vibrant, beautiful town. And now it's a shell of its former self. It's trying. They're trying hard. It's interesting because it's actually in one of the wealthiest, probably the wealthiest county, Chester County in Pennsylvania. But this little former steel town called Coatesville that was built on a steel factory is now largely subsidized housing and struggling businesses because all of the commerce that was in that town was tied to a steel plant that doesn't exist anymore. And You're right, Daniel. People that talk about this in academic terms, they don't go to small-town America. They don't go to rural America because every state, it doesn't matter where you're listening to me right now, in your state are towns just like Coatesville or Whitsville who had booming industry and factories, hiring people, giving them wages that could pay for a home and stores and shops in the town, and now they're hollowed out. And it's tattoo parlors and vape shops, and that's about the sum total of it, and payday lenders, Daniel. It's a depressing scene if you get out of academia and out of big cities.
It is, and that's where the learn to code expression, and said with such disdain. I'll go back to John Kerry the day after Joe Biden was inaugurated when he talked about the Keystone workers who had just all been fired. And he said, well, now they have the choice. Now they can get a job in the new green economy. It's always so easy to talk about dismissing the livelihoods of others, because it's not John Kerry's job that's at risk, right? It's not when Michael Bloomberg talks about shutting down every coal plant in America. He's not worried about his small town. And I bet you Michael Bloomberg, for $105 billion of personal net worth, he's probably never been to Coatesville, and he probably won't go, because there's no good restaurants, there's no good hotels that meet his standards, right? But for regular Americans, it's a great town, or it was a great town, and it could be again a great town. And when you go through these small towns and smaller cities, you see awesome architecture. You see cool Johnstown, Pennsylvania, one of the most beautiful little town squares in America, right? A church on one end, courthouse on the other, gazebo in the middle. It wasn't built because the people there were struggling. It was built because it was a happy, thriving, prosperous town. But now it's a hollowed out shell because they've destroyed the industries around it. And we've allowed this in the name of some larger agenda. And it's always driven by people in D.C., in New York, in San Francisco, or around the world. You have to stop doing this to our fellow Americans.
And I'm not smart enough to know how to parse it all, and I'm not an economist, and I don't even study energy the way you do. Both of them interest me, and as a talk show host, I kind of try to be a jack of all trades, but I master really very little of it, and so I readily confess what I don't know. And I know it's a little more complex than this, but for years I remember hearing people say, the big box store, Walmart, would come into the town, and I saw it in the birthplace of my hometown, Richmond, Missouri. Richmond, Missouri used to be a great town with a little town square and the men's clothier and the jeweler and the pharmacist and the restaurant and all of these great things on the square. Now it's a hollowed-out little town itself, quite frankly, and there's the giant Walmart on the edge of town that services most of the county. And I'm not anti-Walmart or whatever, and I get it, like the online age and people ordering, and maybe, online retailers are also part of the issue. There's a lot of dynamics at play, but the bottom line is when you're importing, as you've said, all the cheap crap from countries that aren't taxed at the level we're taxed to make things and sell it to them, that's imbalanced. That's completely unfair.
It is. And the Walmart example you gave, and I'm with you, I'm not anti-Walmart, I'm not anti-anything, but COVID really pointed out the imbalance that we have in our economics. Because remember, during the COVID crisis, the Walmarts were allowed to stay open, but the little mom and pop shops were ordered closed. That's the sort of structural imbalance that our government has allowed. And as much as we have these anti-corporate advocates and people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, their policies have driven corporatism, right? Their policies have made banks bigger and Walmarts bigger. And that's why we don't have as many mom and pop shops, because the amount of regulation, the amount of burden they've put on them. And we've done this also to the energy industry. There's a reason why we want to get our oil and gas and coal from foreign countries. It's a lot cheaper to have a 9-year-old girl mine your coal in Indonesia than it has a 50-year-old guy in Coatesville or Whitsville, West Virginia, right? It's a lot cheap. There's no overhead, right? They don't require things like safety goggles and helmets. So it's really lucrative for the coal business. But how are we okay with ourselves as a country that these are the values we're exporting, right? In fact, we demand these standards of living and salary and insurance and health care on our workers, but then we create a system that we just drive it to slave labor in Southeast Asia, and we call this free trade, right? Free trade. Yeah. It's not. It's pure corporatism. It's pure immorality, quite frankly. I don't know if Tariff World is going to win. I hope it does. I want the president to succeed, but gosh darn it, I'm happy that finally these towns are getting a spotlight shined on them. Because for 30 years, they've been kicked in the teeth and told, learn to code. Get an OnlyFans page, right? If you're pretty. Yeah. Drive for Uber. Did you ever think about that? Or they make fun of them. You're a bunch of rednecks, bunch of inbred. You married and that's what we do. And we just laugh at them. Or we flood them with opioids because it's cheap and it packs a big punch.
Daniel Turner is the head of Power the Future. There was a comment on X yesterday that I thought brilliant, and I shared it. the vision of the United States as a giant bank served by a giant military and kept functioning by lots of poor people on bikes and in cars, delivering food to the bankers and their adjuncts before returning to their rentals to enjoy crappy imported goods manufactured by the bankers' foreign clients has, well, failed to inspire. I thought it was a great comment. Here's J.D. Vance. This is 1352. J.D. Vance making a similar point to yours, Daniel, yesterday. Listen.
During the first Trump administration, everybody said that Trump's tariffs were going to be inflationary back then. What actually happened? We had 1.5% inflation. We had the fastest growing economy in a generation, and we had the beginning of a manufacturing renaissance in the United States of America. Then, of course, we had 4 terrible years of the Biden administration. But I think it's useful for all of us to step back and ask ourselves, what has the globalist economy gotten the United States of America? And the answer is fundamentally it's based on 2 principles: incurring a huge amount of debt to buy things that other countries make for us. And to make it a little bit more crystal clear, we borrow money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufacture. That is not a recipe for economic prosperity. It's not a recipe.
Yeah, and Daniel Turner, I'll give you the final 30 seconds. I think he pretty much put the exclamation point on your point.
He did, and he's lived this, right? He's lived in those small towns of poverty, and it's remarkable to have an elected official who comes from that world, especially coupled with Trump, who comes from rich Manhattan billionaire. But to have someone who represents the heartland and sees these towns that have been decimated and wants to put in policies, whether they're energy policies or manufacturing policies, that can turn their situation around, I think it's great.
All right, Daniel, you've been lambing. Now go count some sheep and get some rest. We'll have you back soon. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. That's Daniel Turner. Power of the Future. Daniel Turner, PTF on X. Rough Greens.